Hello, this is Georgina Rose, part-time esoteric content creator and part-time Center of Pestilence, and welcome back to the Darling YouTube channel. On this channel, we discuss magic, mysticism, religion, the occult, and everything on the fringes of esoterica. And in this video, we're going to be sort of returning to tradition and talking about books. I used to talk a lot about occult books. I've made a number of YouTube videos about occult books, what they are, the good ones, but this is a topic I've actually never touched on. It's a video I've been wanting to make for like a year, and it is going to be a little different than my other videos about books. My other videos about books are reading guides, so it's like recommendations and reading orders and stuff like that. But this is just a list of important books. This is not a beginner book video. This is not a like Thelema book video. This is a general video about what I have decided are the 10 most influential occult books of all time, maybe. Of course, you're welcome to disagree with me, but I think regardless of whether you agree with the order, though it's not really ordered in any particular order, whether you agree with like the books I put on here or not, you've got to admit these are really important. And I think for anyone who wants a nuanced understanding of occultism, you should be at least aware of these books, right? You don't need to sit down and read them all the way through to be an occultist, right? But if you want to have a big understanding on what occultism is and sort of the foundations of what is known as Western esotericism, these are really good books to read. Some of them are going to be very classic and some of them are a little bit more modern, but I think the modern ones are especially relevant in the modern Western occult community. So this channel is about Western esotericism, so these books will be focusing on the West magical tradition, not ones from the East. If you're going to include Eastern esotericism, that would have to be a different list. I can make a list that includes both Eastern and Western mysticism if you guys want, but this is just going to be focusing on the West because that's a little simpler. So let's get into the books. So the first book on this list is a little bit cheating because it's kind of 3 books in one. I have a few of these where it's like 5 books of, the 3 books of, so let me cheat a little bit. But that would be the 3 books of occult philosophy by Agrippa. So if you get into the occult community, especially on like Discord or Reddit or something, a book that people recommend you all the time is Agrippa. I've always said Agrippa is not a great first read. I think if you read Agrippa first, you're going to be bored and confused because Agrippa is very much the lawnmower manual of occultism, but it's recommended a lot for a reason. A lot of the modern Western tradition is built upon the ideas within Agrippa. And to sit down and read Agrippa teaches you so much information that you really need. It's a long book, it's hard, but it's very much a source book. It's a foundation. It's kind of textbook-like in its nature. And it covers all sorts of topics. It's not specifically about one thing or one specific magical method. It's very broad and covers a lot of things. And one thing that I really like about it that you don't see as much in modern occult literature, which a lot of the books on this list are, you know, they're source books, so they do have this component. It does have a philosophical undercurrent and explains why magic works. One thing that is lacking in so much modern occult literature, in my opinion, no shade, is that they don't explain why magic works, and Agrippa really gives you that foundation. So that's why I think people actually recommend Agrippa to beginners super often, even though I don't know if it's necessarily the best book to start with, unless you're ambitious, in which case, start with it. Do as thou will. The second book on this list is the Bible. Yes, I am serious. That Bible. So, the Bible is the foundation of a lot of modern Western culture. Even just for cultural literacy, I think everyone should at least have an understanding of the Bible. I would recommend reading it. I think for cultural literacy, it's very important. But for magical literacy, it's especially important because one thing that people forget is that when we're talking about the Western occult tradition, we're talking about a lineage, right? We're talking about a lineage that goes back to Greece, to Kabbalah, to all these things. And as that lineage evolves, obviously, Christian forms of magic and mysticism are going to enter into it. If you look at Hermeticism, which is sort of the beginning of what led to modern occultism, specifically the Golden Dawn, you're going to notice there's a lot of Christian imagery in there. Even the LBRP, which is a popular ritual that I have talked about extensively, that has a very strong Christian element to it. You talk about the archangels, you talk about, you know, the Kabbalistic cross, which, you know, that's got a lot of ties to various Christian and some Jewish sources. And even if you're a folk practitioner, even though this list is going to be very ceremonial centric, there's a lot in the Bible that a folk practitioner can learn from and take from. Particularly the Psalms are all basically spells and they have specific meanings. Even in Catholicism, there are a specific set of Psalms that are known to be, you know, the harshest and can essentially be used for cursing, even within that framework. So the Bible is really important. And in Thelema, as many Thelemites, you know, they see, they're like, oh my God, there's nothing Christianity with Thelema. That's not true. Imagery in things like Revelations heavily influenced Crowley, and so to fully understand Thelema, you need a little bit of grasp on Christianity. I think that it is just cultural literacy, and so much magic comes from that book, it's insane. I find that the longer I'm an occultist, the more I find Christianity interesting. Growing up, I found it kind of boring, and I was like, yeah, get to the exciting stuff, but now that I'm an occultist, I can look back on it and find it significantly more interesting than I used to think it was. The next book on this list is Crowley. So I wanted to pick something by Aleister Crowley for this list. And it was really a hard thing to think about, right? I was like, is it the Book of the Law? And I'm like, well, the Book of the Law is the central text of Thelemite. It's critical, but is it the most influential thing he wrote on Thelemites? Sure, but on the wider community, I wasn't sure. And I thought about ABA, which is the big blue brick, the sort of textbook of Thelema. I was like, is it that one? And I was sitting there, and I was like, no, it is Liber 777. I think that would be the one that you should reach for if you want to talk about influence, because Liber 777, while it may not be the Crowley book that people immediately think of, it was a really successful and intricate attempt of syncretizing all these magical traditions across the world together. So modern occultism is highly syncretic. There are very few modern, like Western magical traditions that do not pull from a variety of things. Very few things exist in isolation. And that's not a new thing, right? If you look into the history of religion, you're going to notice that religions interacting is how a lot of religious ideas grew, developed, and were formed. And so when we talk about bringing them together, which as Thelemites, we bring a lot together, right? That's one of the beauties of our tradition. And as modern occultist, whether you're a chaos magician, whether you're a hermeticist, whether you're a variety of things, right? Having a sort of table that can sync it all together and tie it all together is really impressive. Liber 777 is a little intimidating to look at. It's definitely not as reader-friendly as modern correspondence books like the Llewellyn Book of Correspondence. I may be pronouncing that title slightly wrong. It's something along those lines. But it is so extensive, and just with that alone, if you take some time to look at it, you can really develop such a huge, rich understanding. And it saves you so much time. If you have a copy of that, you don't need to like look through all the mythos to know what a certain incense corresponds to. So I think that's one of his most influential works, and it is one of his masterworks. Now we're gonna turn back the clock by a lot of years, and we're gonna go back to Hermeticism. So when talking about Hermeticism, there are kind of two Hermeticisms that I think are relevant. And I'm going to distinguish them just for clarity's sake. So there's what I'm going to call classical Hermeticism. That is the teachings of Hermes Trismegistus and sort of all the original Hermetic stuff that's deeply Neoplatonic and originated far in the past. And then there is the Neo-Hermeticism, the modern Hermeticism that's mostly from the Golden Dawn, where people are really looking at the Golden Dawn, the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn's materials. So for classical Hermeticism, which you do somewhat need to understand modern Hermeticism, because classical Hermeticism really is a huge component of this Western lineage that has existed for a long time. The key book for that is the Corpus Hermeticum. The Corpus Hermeticum is actually not that long. It's one of those sort of more esoteric texts where you're going to read it, it may not immediately make perfect sense to you, but it is something that you can work through and you can study through. I really recommend reading people's commentaries on it or doing like a study book group with it. There are a lot of people online who have done like reading groups with it. So you can read a lot of people's notes and articles on it that I think will make it pretty digestible. It's not incredibly difficult. It's not like you're reading the Zohar or, you know, the Book of the Lies or something like it. It's something you can read and it won't take you like years and years to get, but I do recommend reading commentaries with it. It's a bit of a challenging read, but it establishes so much of this material that exists later on that I really think it's important to have on this list. And it's incredibly impactful and is pretty much the first thing anyone thinks of when thinking of Hermeticism. The other thing people think when thinking of Hermeticism is the Emerald Tablet. I want to be clear, I'm talking about the Emerald Tablet, not the Emerald Tablets of Thoth. Those are different. Thoth, the Atlantean Emerald Tablets, and the Emerald Tablet are not the same thing. I went with Corpus because the Emerald Tablet, like the actual original one, is really short, and the Corpus Hermeticum is a little longer and goes a bit more in depth. So those two together, I mean, you can read them side by side. The Emerald Tablet takes like 15 minutes to read. Now, we're spinning the clock forward, and we're continuing with Hermeticism with the Golden Dawn by Israel Regardie, which is the black brick, known colloquially, and it is the published entire teachings of the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. I have a whole video on the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. They were a highly influential Western ceremonial magic order, and without them, modern occultism would look so different, right? Thelema came from the Golden Dawn, many elements of Wicca come from the Golden Dawn, chaos magic has Golden Dawn influence, and Golden Dawn is everywhere. And to understand that, you just gotta read one book. There are many books commenting on the Golden Dawn, and some of them are pretty incredible, so read those too. But the real big deal is that one book. It has the knowledge lectures. With the knowledge lectures, we're taught people going through various degrees to explain metaphysical context. And it has the rituals with these really good commentaries. It's a textbook. It's long. It's one that for me, instead of reading it straight through, the way that I like to read it is if I'm working on a specific thing, I will turn to the knowledge lecture on it or the ritual on it and just kind of jump around it rather than just reading it straight through. But it has everything you need, and it honestly could be used as a self-study textbook. There's a thing now where people are doing this whole self-initiation of the Golden Dawn stuff where they're basically, instead of joining Golden Dawn because the original Golden Dawn exists, there are revival groups that are like Neo-Golden Dawn orders, but they're not the same as the original Golden Dawn. They're not an unbroken lineage, but there are revivalist Golden Dawn groups. People are doing this thing instead of that, if they don't want to do that, called self-initiation, where they work through the Golden Dawn, through that book and through various writings on self-initiation on their own, which is a really unique way to go through Western occult traditions, as in the past they were very order-based, whereas now with the internet, everything's been decentralized. People are learning things very differently. Because in a sense, I do think when orders like the Golden Dawn and the AA began publishing their materials, which Crowley published a lot of his materials through what is known as the Equinox, which was a periodical of the AA. This is not on the list, but I'm going to make a short aside. Reading the Equinox, I really do suggest picking up Lon Milo DuQuette's Gems of the Equinox books, because they sort of highlight what's important out of them. Because the thing is, the Equinox is beautiful, but there are like poems and music in them that are kind of like not really the magical material you want to look at, though they are still, you know, historically beautiful and relevant. So read the Golden Dawn. That would be good. And I guess the Equinox can be helpful as well, but the Equinox is a big task to go into. So I don't know if I really want to put that one on this list, because that's not really one book. That was a series of books, whereas the Golden Dawn is one book. But I guess I'm cheating and giving 2 recommendations right here. So I don't know. Call me out for that one. I cheated. I didn't really put 10 on this list. I may not even put 10 in the video title, because I've been cheating the entire video. But I'm trying my best to keep this short. It's just there are so many incredible books that have shaped the tradition that I love. The next book on this list is one that is incredibly controversial. Though now that I think about it, I think many of the books on this list are controversial. Is it Western occultism if there isn't a little bit of controversy involved? But this one is really interesting, and it's going to shape a few other books that are later on this list, and that would be the Book of Enoch. So the Book of Enoch is actually biblical apocrypha. Apocrypha is a fancy term for books that really didn't make the cut for the Bible or that were removed. If you didn't know this, if you look at different versions of the Bible, whether it's the Orthodox, the Catholic, the King James, the New English version, there are a lot of them. They actually change what books are in there, and they change the translations pretty radically. And so if you look at the different Bibles, specifically if you compare the Catholic and the Protestant ones, you're going to know that the Protestant ones has different books. There are entirely different sections. And so if you're reading a different Bible than someone, you could be taking up an entirely different interpretation of the Christian mysteries. But beyond that, there are things that were taken out of almost all Bibles. And anything that is taken out of the Bible is apocrypha. But one that is the most interesting is the Book of Enoch. So this really, really changes the game with Christian mysticism. And it's actually accepted by one branch of mainstream Christianity, literally just one. The Book of Enoch has so much about angels in it, and that's what's relevant about it, right? There's this cool mysticism stuff, there's this angel stuff. It's really fascinating, and so much mysticism originates from this specific apocryphal text. You gotta read it. It's not that long. I remember I got a copy of it when I visited Portland a couple of years ago, and I read it on the plane. So it's not huge, and it's incredibly rich in mystic meaning. So now that we've said Enoch, I feel like it's great to talk about Enochian. So Enochian is an angelic magical system. It's a very specific angelic magical system, actually. For reference, not all angels are the same. This is a huge mistake people make. They think that all angels magically are the same. No, there are many different types of angels. There are Enochian angels, there are Shem angels, there are archangels, and they do not function the same. The Enochian system was discovered by John Dee and Edward Kelly, 2 English magicians, many years ago, and they sort of scried and wrote down this whole system of magic that then became one of the sort of crown gems of later systems like the Golden Dawn and Thelema. And through Enochian, there have been incredible revelations. I will caveat this with Enochian is one of the more advanced forms of magic out there, but even if you're not ready to practice it, you can still read it. And so I will recommend John Dee's 5 Book of Mystery. Those are that's the big one. John Dee's 5 Books of Mystery, that's the big one that gets brought up a lot. It's quite good, quite dense. As well, his journals are also used in people who are studying Enochian, so keep that in mind. But the big one's the 5 Books of Mystery. There are sort of supplementary writings by him that are interesting and worth checking out if you want to actually engage in the system. If you're going to engage in Enochian, please don't just read one book. But if you want a context on what it is, because even if you don't practice it, I think you should have context on it just for how influential it's been. Just look at that. But if you're going to practice, please go deeper for my sanity. Now, we're going to talk about probably the most hyped up Western occult book, and one that, well, okay, the whole book isn't hyped. Sections of the book are hyped. People like part of this book. That would be the Keys of Solomon. So there is the Greater Key and there's the Lesser Key, and within the Greater Key and the Lesser Key, there are sub-books. The most talked about one is in the Lesser Key, the Ars Goetia, which is where modern demon magic comes from. But there's a lot more in the Keys of Solomon. There are the Pentacles of Solomon, which are used very heavily as talismans. There is the Ars Pauline. There's a lot more in there. From the Keys of Solomon, there is an entire magical tradition with a whole complexity to it. It's very complicated ceremonial magic, but it is sort of some of the most impactful and some of the most incredibly beautiful. It's just a lot of tools, a lot of effort, but it's become infamous for a reason, right? The Keys of Solomon, I feel like I can't even give an introduction to them. They're so well known, they're so famous, I feel like I don't even know what to say, how to briefly summarize them. So the next one that I want to talk about is the Mystical Kabbalah by Dion Fortune. Dion Fortune was an incredible female occultist. She really pioneered a lot of great ideas. I am personally very inspired from her. She's one of my favorites. She had such incredible work. But her book, The Mystical Kabbalah, is sort of her triumph. There are a couple other things people recommend from her. Psychic Self-Defense is one of them. I like Psychic Self-Defense, but I like Mystical Kabbalah more because I find Kabbalah incredibly interesting. For those who don't know, Kabbalah is the lifeblood of Western esotericism. It flows through it. It is everywhere. You can't take it out. I know a lot of people have tried to take Kabbalah out of occultism. That's a stupid idea. That's dumb. I don't know why people want to do that. Kabbalah is beautiful, and no, Hermetic Kabbalah is not the same as Jewish Kabbalah. If you want to look at Jewish Kabbalah, Sefer Yetzirah's Bahir, Zohar, that's what you're looking at. Mystical Kabbalah is the best ones for Hermetic Kabbalah because it really puts Kabbalah in understandable terms and uses metaphors that make sense. Another book that's really good is Chicken Kabbalah, but it's not as old and it has a sort of different vibe. Read Chicken Kabbalah if you want a more like friendly, funny vibe. Read Mystical Kabbalah if you want that sort of, more formalized vibe, or you could read both. Why not both? But Mystical Kabbalah, it's incredibly impactful, and I am a big fan of the book. I perennially come back to it. Whenever I'm sort of struggling or working through a certain spherot or sort of, feeling that influence in my life, I like to read the Mystical Kabbalah sections on it. They're so in-depth, and they're comprehensive. It's comprehensive in a way that it like explains it to you, but it doesn't spend like a year on it, right? So it's comprehensive, but it's not overkill. It's very, very good. Now, my final book I'm gonna list is gonna be the one that's gonna get me the most comments going, read, Georgina, no! And I'm gonna say it. And some people are not gonna like it, but it's the truth. Truth is often hard to hear, isn't it? And that would be Wicca for the Solitary Practitioner by Scott Cunningham. Hear me out. So this book is very different than the rest of the books. I still think it's a good book. I'm not saying it's a bad book. It's just very different. And it's the only witchy book I put on this list on purpose. So this book made solitary occultism a thing. It was the first book, to my knowledge, that was really focused around solitary practice. And what it did was it revolutionized Wicca. So Wicca, whether you like it or not, however you feel about Wicca, which I'm actually a fan of Wicca, I'm actually pro-Wicca. I did a whole podcast forever ago called In Defense of Wicca. Wicca is how a lot of people get into occultism. It's very much the gateway drug of magic. And so when we look at Wicca, what is the book that people reach for? Scott Cunningham. Scott Cunningham is always recommended. He always comes back. And without this book, solitary Wicca probably wouldn't exist. I guess it could have existed through another writer at the time, Syl Ravenwolf, who did a lot of the same sort of work and concepts were thrown in. But I think this book is just, it was groundbreaking. It sold so many copies. It's one of the most common occult books you see in stores, and it's held up. There are some things in it that I do kind of disagree with, but there are things in every book on this list that I actually kind of disagree with. I don't love everything in every book on this list, but they're important. You know what I mean? You can think a book is important without agreeing with everything in it. One is the sort of mental failings of this current postmodern age. People are like, oh, you can't recommend a book if you don't agree with everything in it. I don't think that's true. I think there's still value in reading things, even if it kind of challenges you or you disagree with some things in it. But yeah, I think Wicca for the Solitary Practitioner is incredibly influential. And I'll just say it, me as a practitioner learned a lot from it. And there are some techniques in it that I still use. So this has been my attempt at creating a list of the 10 most influential modern occult books. I'm sure some of you guys will disagree. I'm sure someone will comment a bok where they're like, why do you not include this? Why do you not include like the Picatrix? Why did you not include the Black Pullet? There are a lot of other books when I was making this list that I was like, I kind of want to put that there. Like I was considering putting a lot of things that didn't make the cut. If you guys want me to make like a part 2 of this, I guess I could do that as a Patreon video, like the next 10 most influential. I could do one of these for witchcraft, one for paganism. I feel like it's just a fun thing to talk about. And I've missed talking about books. It feels good to be sort of back to the root of this channel and talking about sort of what made this channel this channel. I like books. I think reading is good. I think we should, protect occult books and be literate. Literacy is based. Now, thank you for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. If you subscribe for 93 days, you will meet your holy guardian angel and you will never need to read a book again because literacy is dumb. I changed my mind. Anti-literacy action. All right. You can find me on a variety of platforms. I just made a Substack, which is a blog, so that's new. I wrote my first blog post on it. I'm also on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and I host the podcast, Postmodern Iconoclast. It's on this channel. I just started uploading the podcast to this channel too, so check that out. You don't even need to leave the channel. You can just go, and I made a little playlist and everything. And you can also listen to that on other podcasting platforms if you prefer that. And you can support me on Patreon. If you support the Patreon, you get extra videos every month. early access. I give all the videos like a week or so early. You get a lot of things. You get ritual guides as well. I write like a 20-page, 15 to 20 page, depending on the month, ritual guide every single month for my patrons. And you get my love and support, and you enable me to keep doing this. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a lovely day, night, afternoon, mid-morning, evening, wherever you are. All right, bye.